Welcome to the Staffing Playbook podcast, your go-to resource for navigating the dynamic world of staffing and HR. I'm your host, Stephen Farrell. Join me each week as we dive deep into the strategies, insights, and stories that shape the staffing industry. From the latest trends to expert interviews and practical tips, we'll equip you with the right tools and knowledge to succeed in the staffing industry. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, the Staffing Playbook is here to help you play your best game. Let's get started.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, everybody, to the Staffing Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Farrell. We have got such a special treat for you today. We are joined by no other than Tina Haslett. She is the CEO of Spectrum Recruiting Solutions. We're going to be talking about the candidate journey. Tina, how are you doing this lovely Friday?
I'm so good. How are you, Steve?
Good. I'm on my mobile right now. I got this fancy new mic for the show, and everything was working up until I tried to go live. So apologize there. But hopefully the audio sounds good. Sounds good on your end?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Awesome. Okay, so I want to do a proper introduction for Tina here before we get started. And Tina, you can fill me in if I get anything wrong. But Tina is... she's the CEO of Spectrum Recruiting Solutions. She is a recruiting revolutionary and relationship champion who really transforms talent. She has a mission to increase diversity in leadership, which I love, across all roles, industries like aerospace, defense, medical devices, manufacturing, and more. She's got over 24 years of experience and deeply understands the challenges and the opportunities to attracting and retaining top talent. And so in this episode, I'm going to be interviewing Tina here on the candidate journey and really get a better understanding of what a successful candidate journey looks like. So did I miss anything, Tina?
Nope, you did great. It's perfect.
Awesome. Well, I want to, before I jump into the questions, tell me a little bit about you, your background, and why you're so passionate about this topic.
Yeah, well, like most recruiters, I fell into being a recruiter too. So now I've done this almost 24 years, and I fell into it because I was moving back from Baltimore and I needed a job. And so I went into an agency and asked them to help me find a job. And it was a whole new world. And they ended up hiring me. So that got my foot in the door with recruiting. And I stayed with that company for 17 years and then decided to go out on my own with Spectrum.
Ooh.
So yeah, it's kind of cool how it all unfolded. But I'm married and 2 kids and live in exotic Riverton.
Very exotic.
Right?
That must have been a big leap of faith to to start your own staffing company, right?
Well, it took a hot minute, to be honest with you, to figure out if that's ultimately what I wanted to do. So I did take a 1-year professional sabbatical, and we bought a Winnebago and we toured the country with our 2 girls and really took the time and space to figure out, okay, is this what I want and why do I want it? What's going to be different? What's the goal? There's a million agencies out there. How do you set yourself apart? So once I got to the conclusion of, yep, this is what I want, it really marries my business love with people and making those matches. So it just made sense. And we launched in March of 2018.
Wow. That's really neat. On the topic today, there's a lot of just you see this on LinkedIn, you see a lot of news, you hear about these fake job postings, and you hear, people talking about they've applied to 100 different jobs and really didn't get any answers. And then the ones that are getting interviews, they get ghosted. There's no follow up. It's that traditional, well, Tina, this has been a great interview. You're definitely one of our top candidates, and I've got a few more to interview. And so I'll get back to you in the coming week. And then you hear nothing, right? And so I think there's a lot of people that are maybe a little jaded right now because there's not as much jobs out there as there was just even 2 years ago. And so I think it's really important that we're talking about this today, because whether someone's a right fit or not, you want to have communication with your candidate ongoing. You want them to feel valued and respected through the whole process. And so maybe we can tackle just that as a question is, when it comes to feeling valued and respected through the process, where do we start? Where do you start?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, definitely. Yeah. So the ghosting thing, I mean, that's real. The truth is, recruiters have a lot of damage control to do right now, just as an industry. There's been a lot of ghosting and unprofessionalism that way, but now we're also juggling AI simultaneously, where there's not a lot of human interaction. So how do you navigate both of those combined, right? So that's the biggest challenge. I definitely think everybody deserves some type of response, and that's definitely a best practice within Spectrum, is even if we're not the place for you, or it's not the job for you, or whatever doesn't align, at least there's some form of communication going back out to everybody. And I think that's just a basic level of professional courtesy that should be evaluated within every practice.
Yeah, if you think about it, just the image of your company, right? You're a representative of your company, or your recruiter is a representative, and if you're ghosting candidates just because they're not the right fit, like you're taking a chance on the interview, but there were some red flags and you addressed them and you weren't happy or satisfied with that answer, so you moved on. But if you just ghost someone, whether they're going to work for you or not, now they've got a poor taste in their mouth when it comes to your organization.
That's exactly right. And the leadership there, right? The manager's responsible for this. And by definition, that was their candidate journey with you. So that's something that definitely tracks and it's followed. It affects your external reputation. So companies really do need to have a pulse on what that looks like for them. And if I can I define the
Please.
Candidate journey from the talent acquisition side of things? And
I'd love that.
So it's usually a short journey, right? If a candidate applies to a company, really the candidate journey is their experience from the application to either being ghosted or until that job closes with whatever result. The candidate journey with us, companies like ours, right? Professional recruiting firms, it's a much longer relationship, right? And it evolves over time and it changes because both parties change and the market changes. So you're really investing in these people in the long haul. So ghosting's not going to fly and it's not going to get you anywhere. So it's really it has to remain at that human level.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned the relationship factor. Even with the long-term, professional placement, even in the light industrial space, you may have only a 12-minute interview in light industrial, but you still want to build that rapport and start a relationship, long-term with that candidate, even if you don't have a home for them immediately. I was reading a study. This was the North American Candidate Experience Research Report that said 78% of candidates say their overall experience is in that interviewing and onboarding process is an indicator of how a company values people. So if they're having a poor experience through that interview and onboarding and still start, they're probably having a negative association to the company already out of the gate versus having a really great, positive, informed experience. Now they're becoming a raving fan, from day one.
Yeah, That's exactly right. A great experience is going to create an advocate for you and your company, even if they don't land the job. But being treated professionally and with courtesy and communication, right, is the key factor there. It's going to work for you either way.
Yeah. I remember I was working with a headhunter years ago, and she, she after we had our initial conversation, and she scheduled an interview with the director for me. A day before, she scheduled a meeting with me to go, hey, here's what this director's likely going to be looking for in your resume. Here's the questions he typically asks. Here's some more information on the company that I think will be helpful for you. Here's some tips for other things I want you to look up. Like, just very detailed, really setting me up for success. And I felt like she's now like my partner, like helping me land this job versus like, well, here's your interview with the director. Good luck. I hope you make it out on top.
Yeah, which I think is really powerful. And it's definitely a partnership, right? Like, it's your job to advocate for these candidates. But it's also hard to do because I've had hiring managers push back that we've coached or trained them too much, that it was almost robotic. So there's definitely a balance. But the way that I look at it, interviewing is scary, right? Especially if you have a lot on the line. If you're not working and you desperately need this job, like, you're already going in there worked up and carrying enough weight that if we can remove any of that anxiety and set you up for success, we choose to do it. So we try to prepare them, but a lot of it is they have to have their own accountability too and actually do it, right? So if they don't, that's on the candidate.
Yeah, exactly. Now, in your firm, with a lot of the professional placements that you guys do you gather feedback from candidates about their recruiting experience? And, if you do, what do you do with that information?
Yeah, so we collect it quarterly through a survey is typically where we get most of our responses. I do reach out to candidates that we work with just personally, just to make sure their experience was good and try to follow up with it that way. And then it depends on their feedback, to be very honest with you. Some have had incredible feedback that we've implemented and it worked out really great. Others you just take with a grain of salt, and you have to decide as a company owner, how much is this going to impact us, right? Does it deserve change and for us to evaluate, or was that a one-off situation? Or, you have to put it in perspective. And also looking at the candidate's experience with you, obviously the reviews are going to be a lot better and a lot higher if they land the job. But what I want to know is the 80% of the candidates interviewed that didn't get the job. Like, let's analyze that experience.
So is this a survey you're sending out? Is this a phone call, or kind of a mix of the two?
So it's a mix of the two. So we automatically send out a survey as just part of our process. But if there was anything funky, or honestly, if I'm just curious because I want to know what their experience was, I reach out to them directly. Yeah. And I think it catches people off guard a little bit, but that's okay too.
I think it's a really healthy practice, whether you're a professional placement firm or you're just a recruiter working for a Fortune 500 company, because to your point, 80% of the candidates that don't get through, like, you want that feedback, right? You want to be able to see what they're seeing and to improve your process, because again, that reputation is so important. And how do you know, you may not know there's a negative, you have a negative reputation out there among job seekers just because of your standard recruiting practice that was passed on to you.
Well, that's exactly right. And it's such a small world. The tables could turn next month, right? And so they're going to be maybe needing to apply to a job at your company. And it goes both ways. And that's part of the journey and the experience. Yeah.
Yeah. I often look at companies' Google reviews. And it's interesting. You see a lot of, negative on the negative side, the negative reviews. It's usually, something happened at work. It wasn't fair. They let me go. But it's interesting. I always see reviews written by job seekers that did not get the job that they felt otherwise qualified for.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We live and die by our reviews. I mean, we're a small business, so those are important to us and we pay close attention to it. We got one last year that is just kind of laughable, I guess is the best way to say it. But she was really angry. We don't have her in our system. And she was saying that we weren't a real company. Like, this company doesn't exist. And she was really fired up. How do you prove that you exist more than responding and reaching out and trying to communicate? So it kind of is what it is. But yeah. laughable.
Yeah, I really like, I mean, I think you gave a really good tip just right out of the beginning is gather feedback on your candidates, the ones that made it all the way through and all the ones that did not, and learn from it, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Be willing to listen to the hard stuff.
so speaking of hard stuff, I want to get into like personalization and communication with the candidate. Because this is a very skilled position as a headhunter, as a recruiter, and you have to tailor your approach to the unique needs of each candidate. What does your firm do as well as yourself in tailoring your approach to each candidate?
That's a good question. I would honestly say we don't. We don't tailor it specifically to every candidate. We do our best to listen. Obviously, they have their top priorities and what they're looking for in a job, in a situation, but it's more tailoring to like big picture ideas, like where and what are you looking for? What type of roles and responsibilities do you want? But the volume of candidates that we work with, it's just way too many to tailor searches around them. However, we are blessed that we work in such a tight niche vertical, manufacturing professionals in Utah. So whatever they're looking for, so long as they fit in our vertical, there's a lot of gray room and room for flexibility. So sometimes candidates will come in saying, hey, this is what I want, and they're pretty rigid in what they're looking for, but they haven't considered this whole other world. So once you expose them to other jobs and opportunities, everything softens a little bit, and there's usually a happy medium, and then you can make better matches that way. For example, we were staffing for this company that does swag, that does like the marketing material for companies. Mm-hmm. They wanted a business manager. I knew the perfect girl for the role, and she only wanted part-time. They wanted full-time. So I was just racking my brain like, okay, how can we make this work? So what ended up happening is we did a job share. So she took half the hours, and then we found somebody that wanted the opposite hours. They worked together. The company got their full-time business manager. She got her part-time hours and schedule she needed, and the other candidate was able to fill in the rest. And then they got two brains, in one role. So I think a lot of it is just getting creative and thinking outside the box and working with people that can be a little bit fluid. Is going to set everybody up for success.
It's interesting. I asked you, how do you tailor your approach? And you're like, well, we maybe don't have one, but then you just like gave three really important things in tailoring your approach, which I love.
But maybe not specifically to the candidate. Yeah, like it was a group effort and very collaborative. But if you tried to tailor it specifically to one person all the time, it wouldn't work.
Well, you mentioned what is the candidate's top priorities? Because this is their life, their livelihood. Like I appreciate where you dive in and like, what are your priorities? Pay, schedule, work life, harmony, whatever it may be, career opportunity. But then, when those don't quite align with the company you're sourcing them for, maybe there's some information that's missing. Maybe they don't see the bigger picture, and to be able to articulate that and help them see that, it might shift their priorities slightly, or maybe they can see where their top priority fits in it and the second and third maybe don't, and they can take that into consideration. And the fact that you also look at the flexibility of that part-time, the person was great, qualified, but they wanted part-time, the company wanted full-time, and you were able to, okay, I'll just get two part-timers that are just as good to fill that gap. That's pretty creative.
Thanks. I thought
so. There was a study done by IBM's Smarter Workforce Institute. They said 80% of candidates say a personalized recruitment experience can change their mind about a role or a company they once doubted. Back to that big picture you were just mentioning.
I completely agree with that. So oftentimes we'll partner with a company and perhaps they have a terrible reputation. And we go in questioning, I don't know if we want our name tied to this. Do we really want to represent you? What's happening? So it's a requirement for our crew to go out on site and meet with every company and get a feel for the culture, take a tour, meet personalities and that type of thing. And those questions we drill down on, like, here's the situation. Here's what your external reputation looks like. if we're going to recruit for you, how do we set these candidates up for success? And where does the drama come from, basically?
Yeah.
And the helpful part, what's the solution to it? Where's it going? So we can better tell their story of like, yeah, our reputation is terrible. We have 2 stars on Glassdoor, tons of negative reviews. Oh, but you were just purchased 3 months ago and you're in a major transition, and it gets messy, right? Business is messy. If we can tell that story and humanize it and really put perspective to it, so candidates aren't making up their own stories about the situation, the success rate's a lot higher. But you do have to truly trust that that is the situation with these companies.
Yeah, that's important. I had a large customer in the past that just over time created a pretty negative reputation in the entire community, right? High volume, 2,000 people, out on the production floor. And they knew that, they realized that. And over months and even over a year, they worked on fixing those internal issues. And so we would have candidates come in every day saying, "Oh, it's that company? No, I've heard terrible things. My brother worked there, my aunt," and it's like, I validate that, Tina. However, let me share a story. Let me share what we've been working on with them, what they've been working on internally for the past year. And yes, all those are valid, but that's the past. That is not what's happening currently. And hey, by the way, I can connect you to another associate out here that started a month ago, and you can talk to her and just ask all those questions and all of your concerns, and you'll be surprised. You'll probably put most of those at ease.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, have an internal reference, somebody who's living it right now.
That's right.
That's an absolutely fabulous idea. And I would even say push back a little bit more. At that point, they have a choice, right? Like they can go into it looking at like, well, I might be a victim, or I can contribute to this change and actually make a difference.
That's right. Yeah. All right. So I want to get narrow in back into the candidate journey. This has been really fun. When it comes to headhunters out there and recruiters and professional placement firms, let's talk about just strategies to maintain clear and constant communication with the candidate every stage. Could you maybe walk us through a little bit more of that, what it looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all about setting clear expectations out of the gate, right? You can start a conversation by saying, okay, we're going to move forward with this position. Average fill time is 4 to 6 weeks. So it's going to be the marathon and not the sprint, and just really set that long term. Our candidates are going to hear from us every week. We set a very strict meeting rhythm. And I think that's part of our success is the feedback and the update may be like, we don't know anything more. He's out of town for a week, or she's on her honeymoon, whatever the situation. We're communicating what we know, if it's not moving forward, or if it is, and what next steps are. But really setting the clear expectation and helping them to recognize that you're an advocate and you're going to stay in touch and you're doing the due diligence to push these jobs along on their behalf. And it takes the stress away from them a little bit more, as long as they feel like they can depend on you for the update.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's often, it's surprising, but I think that is often missed. Setting the clear expectations up front of what to expect, fill time, right? At the time, typically, you get feedback from the initial interview, and if that goes well, like it's likely going to be another week or two before you get your next interview. But then you're giving them weekly updates, regardless if anything is happening or not. I think a lot of people miss that in the recruiting cycle because they're working with so many candidates right now. I mean, you've probably seen it. You put a job out and you get 1,000 resumes in a week, and you're like, oh my gosh. And there's a lot of good ones, and you want to be able to talk to everybody that you think is a great fit before you make a decision in most cases. And so, to set that expectation, to be clear, it gives that candidate the opportunity to stay committed to the whole process and not feel like they're being ghosted.
Yeah, exactly. And to add to that, I think it's also important to communicate 1,000 applicants. We selected 10. We're narrowing it down to 5. You're one of those, and we're moving forward. Like, I think it's okay to share the data so they can keep a realistic expectation too of like, okay, at this point I have 20%, chance. I'm going to keep fighting for it, and hopefully feel privileged that I was one of 1,000 applicants that got an interview.
Oh,
So they're
yeah.
probably feeling good about it.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you, moving on to the candidates that don't move forward, right? Whether they opt out themselves or, the client decides they're just not the best fit. Um, how do you handle that? It's really fun. Like, to this day, I still have a hard time of someone I really liked, but did not get selected. I have a really hard time picking up the phone and just being honest, saying, Tina, it was so great to meet you. So glad you took the time to get to know us, but I have some bad news. It's hard.
Oh, it sucks. Yeah. It's definitely not the best part of the job, but I think that's where the relationship and the trust do come into play. So you're already having the conversation before we know if they got the job or not of, hey, we're in this for the long game. If this one doesn't work out, no, this isn't the end of the line. Here's what it looks like moving forward. And that relationship continues. So it's not, you're not breaking up at that point. So it doesn't sting as much, but there is that element of disappointment. So I think you definitely need to humanize it and share as tactfully as possible any hard feedback that's going to help them better themselves, better their skills, or, just anything that'll help them along the way do better next time.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ran into any situation where you had a top candidate, right, and the top three, and the person did not get selected, and then they tell you, well, I already gave my notice?
Yeah, I've had that happen a couple
Have
times
you?
throughout the year, and you're just like, what?
So
You know
how
what?
do you like? I mean, we're adults, we own it, but how do you? Is there a way to prevent that through the expectations and the constant communication? Is that something top of mind for many recruiters?
It's probably not as top of mind as it should be because you're banking on some common sense being there. But I do think if they're going to give notice, always educating to be like, hey, wait until you get that offer letter in your hand. Let's make sure it's 100% legit and it goes through before you give notice. But there's definitely been some overly confident candidates that went ahead and moved forward and then the offer never came through or they chose somebody else. And I think that's just an experience they probably needed to live through and learn for next time. And
Yeah.
I don't think you can always prevent it. I mean, we're in the business of people, right? And it's so unpredictable sometimes.
It really is. Yeah. It always breaks my heart when I hear that. And it's like, but back to that setting the expectations, like don't give notice until you have an offer letter. I think now if anyone's sourcing for government jobs, it's like, now you got to be even more careful because a lot of those offers have been, postponed or rescinded because of the hiring freeze. And so we all have to keep those things in consideration as we're, sourcing candidates. And I love the, expectations that you set from the beginning so they can make the right decisions along the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would even going to go on a right turn here with AI. I had a friend recently go through a whole interview process, never spoke to a human. This ends up being a scam, so more of a FYI for everybody. She got to the end of the process. They actually sent her an offer letter. The company looked legit. I mean, she's a smart human. It was for an operations manager position, and did all of her research. Along with the offer letter, there was a direct deposit form asking for all of her banking information on,
Oh,
and
no.
it felt so awkward to her the whole time and the whole process, but she needed a job, right? So she's like, I can't tell if this is a real job or not. So there's that factor that people are working with as well.
That's we're gonna have to do a whole nother episode on that down the road because that's gonna become more real for everyone, unfortunately.
Yeah. My point of that is thank goodness she wasn't quitting a job for that too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So people, like, what if they're quitting jobs for fake jobs? That's awful.
Yeah. Yeah. So as a professional placement firm, I would take a guess that building and retaining, developing these relationships with your candidates long term are important, even the ones that are not selected, because you're constantly getting new accounts and different positions to recruit for. And so, from a professional placement firm, are there things that you do to just keep those relationships strong? So when the right job does come up for that person, that they trust you, they want to hear you out and explore that opportunity.
Yeah, I would say that's one of my strong points is the candidate relationship because I run into these people all the time. We're at association events, we're at industry events. So I feel like it's a little bit easier for me than for like a general high volume recruitment firm, because I'm spending time with many of these people frequently. So it's easy to sustain that relationship, and you know who's looking and you know who's not, and it's your responsibility to keep it confidential but still stay connected and so we do it that way. There's obviously emails and texts, all the things that you can quickly stay connected, but I also put some of the responsibility on them. I mean, it's a 50-50 relationship. So I encourage people to stay in touch with us too. And the best way to communicate with me, because I'm not a long phone talker, I hate phone conversations. um, but I am very, very good at responding quickly and text and email and everything. So, there's a balance and let's make it effective for both of us. But I would like to talk a little bit about what that looks like long-term in that candidate
Yeah.
journey. A typical and consistent relationship that I have with people is they'll come in for an interview, get to know them, really like him. Oh, you're an electrical engineer. I have a perfect client, make a great match. And then it goes quiet for a couple of years as he's living out his succession plan, right? And then you hear from him again, and he's a hiring manager and he needs to build out that team. So now you get to walk with him, and as he's evolving into a leadership role, build out his team, learn more about him that way. And then you get a call 2 years later saying, hey, unfortunately, I'm looking for work. We're going through layoffs. You trust him. You know him inside and out. You're advocating for him now. I can quickly call companies and make introductions and networking opportunities for him that's going to get him another job. So that's where it intertwines a little bit too. And perhaps you're not staying consistent in like every 3 months, we're going to reach out or meet for coffee or something. It can go a couple of years because that's life, right? It happens and it happens fast. But ultimately, as long as they see you, they're aware of you. And it could even be like an email campaign, as much as I hate saying that out loud because I don't love campaigns, but your name in front of him, his name in front of you, I'm going to remember him forever.
Yeah. I experienced this myself. I had the same headhunter I've talked about in the past. She helped me land a leadership role, and she would stay in touch about once a year. She'd just call me like, towards the end of the year, how are you? How are things? Like just really, genuine and sweet. And then it came to a point where I needed to hire some key positions that I didn't have time for. And so I called her and said, hey, can you help me? And she did. And it was great.
I was just going to ask you why you haven't recruited this person yet, because if you're not, I'm going to.
But yeah, she stayed in touch with me, and it's funny enough, she added me as a friend on Facebook, and like she just followed my career. And then when I needed her expertise to help hire for my team, like it was somebody I trust and that I worked with personally, and it was like I didn't need to go shop the market for a professional placement firm. I knew exactly who to call.
Oh, that's the best. And that's a whole different kind of relationship journey too, right? All of your channel partnerships. That's another episode for you.
Yes. Let's talk a little bit about challenges and growth. What are the biggest challenges you face when trying to prioritize the candidate experience?
I believe one of the biggest challenges we've faced the last 6 to 12 months is on the client side and getting things to move fast enough and hiring managers to be responsive enough before losing good talent. So we've dove into that quite a bit. And how do we streamline this? How do we get them more engaged? Like what's the issues here? So there was a couple things that came out of it. The time of year and understanding our industry is a big part of it. And we are super blessed to have someone on our team, Kristen Thompson, shout out, that spent her career in HR, in manufacturing. So she can say, well, hey, this is what's happening behind the scenes and educate all of us. And it's not actually about you right now, Tina. It's about this, and this is what they're dealing with. And so that's been really helpful for us to navigate that. And then simultaneously, I would say one thing that's improved a lot too is when we talk to our hiring managers, if they don't already value the responsibilities of hiring, I think it's important for people to understand that overall hiring is a privilege, right? Not everybody gets to hire. Not everybody gets to build these dream teams. So if you own that responsibility, you have to carry the weight of it too. And it's as soon as you tie it to their personal reputation and like, hey, hiring managers, people are looking for the right manager to work for these days. It's a game changer, and we got responses. So between those two things, that was our challenge last year.
Yeah, it's one thing to be able to have a really good experience on the front end with a professional placement firm, but then that can just change on a dime when it's now moved over to the client, to the employer, and it's important to have really the same experience on the front end and on the back end. So is it just having a conversation with the client, with the HR manager, to really express how that candidate journey is important, and ask clarifying questions on their end, what it looks like? What is that process for you to ensure that it's the same experience from your team to the client?
Yeah, it's a phone call, and I start by asking them if they're open to feedback, right? Can I give you some feedback? We're running into some hurdles, and I think we can work through this. Sometimes they're receptive, and it fixes it. But I'm going to be fully honest. We had a client last month that kept rescheduling interviews and time after again, and was late to interviews. And I would just say very disrespectful to our candidates, not appreciating whether they're working or not. It's hard to budget time and get emotionally involved in an interview and get ready, and then it doesn't happen. And it kept happening. We actually just terminated the relationship with the client. We're not willing to represent that. So that feels really good, being able to have that option. But then you have some that haven't even thought about it, because it's really easy to call Spectrum and say, hey, we just have to reschedule all these interviews for next week. Sorry. But when they actually really think about, no, this is still a human that's taking time off work to get there, and all of the things. It's just education. And sometimes it's uncontrollable and they do have to reschedule, and that's fine. But if it's a pattern, that's where you need to get involved.
I'm sure you've never experienced this. You had a candidate is 10 out of 10, perfect for the job. You send them to be interviewed, and the HR manager or owner responds back, and after you've asked how it went, and they're like, not a good fit, I'm sorry, and they move on. And they just had a really busy day. They just weren't paying attention. They weren't in the moment, being a good listener, asking great questions. It was just like, I'm so busy, I have to do this interview, but I got other things to worry about. So they quickly push through the interview, and then they move on. Has that ever happened to you?
Sure has. Yeah. Yeah. And I think gentle pushback is okay. And it's respected more, obviously, if you have a relationship with this person or with this company, and they'll listen to you a little bit more. But you do have to stand up for your candidates once in a while. And it could be that simple, or what we run into, I won't say quite a bit, but often enough, is the person conducting the interview perhaps is threatened, or maybe feeling like, well, this person is too good, they're going to come in and take over my job, and not trusting in the abundance of work at the facility. So it's trying to dive in to really, like, was that the situation? Where was the disconnect? Were they just distracted and didn't put the time and effort into this interview that they needed to? Or is there something more to it?
Yeah, because you don't want to offend the company, right? The HR manager. But I think it's noted, and it's important to push back politely, and solicit deeper additional feedback, and if you catch some cues in there that maybe it was a really busy day for them. They mentioned it. It's like, was this just a busy day for you, and you didn't have time to really take that time with the candidate? Like, that should be okay to ask.
Yeah, and ask them to get specific too. Like, okay, so if they're not the right fit, give me some examples as to why, because then you can address those specific concerns versus just a blanket approach.
Yeah. Do you ever get
those? Maybe they didn't spend the time needed.
I'm sure you've never heard the feedback. They look good on paper. They interviewed well, Tina, but I just have a feeling. They're not the right fit.
That one's a tough one, because you have to recognize, well, if it's on paper, they haven't met them yet, then the culture isn't a factor just yet. But that's when you just push back and say, hey, you hired us to do a job. We're professionals. You've got to trust us to make this match. We've been on site. We've talked through your culture. We know the hiring manager. We know the personalities. Give them 15 to 20 minutes of an exploratory interview. If they feel like it's just exploratory, it's light, it's not a huge time investment, that's enough time to get the conversation going. And then ultimately it can evolve from there. And oh, wow, they love this candidate and it works. And that's great. Or the candidate, maybe it's not a match for either one and they part ways, but at least there's FaceTime, and that's the goal.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, because we have our own internal biases that sometimes we recognize and sometimes we don't, and it affects us all. When we're interviewing, it's like, wow, this is a great candidate, but I just have this weird feeling, and so you have to either you can help push back, or you got to push back yourself and go, why am I feeling this way? Is there anything that logically justifies this weird feeling I have?
Yeah, and maybe they interviewed much different with me than they did with the hiring manager too, so depending on the candidate's date, that could look totally different.
Yeah. When it comes to just measuring success, are there metrics or indicators that you use to elevate the success of your candidate's experience?
Not the experience necessarily, but we do measure outcomes and I would say the quality of client that we're working with, because we want to make sure we're sending people to really great companies. So we have our own grading system, if you will, to grade clients, and nothing formal with the candidates, but who aligns and who doesn't with those grading systems.
Yeah.
And the way that we track success just with clients and candidates in general is more of, okay, how many referrals are we getting? How many people are out there actually advocating for us? How many clients come in through existing candidate relationships? I think that's
right.
Our biggest pipeline of new companies and new jobs that we get to work on is candidates that went through that experience with us and then brought us with it to their new company.
Yeah. There's a big piece of this that I think is going to, it's been a challenge in the past, but I think it's going to be a bigger challenge over the next couple of years. And that is candidates getting multiple competing offers. And so when you're working with candidates, how do you navigate those situations where a counteroffer comes in, maybe from the job that they're leaving, or a competing job offer? Because it's very disruptive. What are some tips you can give people out there that they are in that situation where there's a counteroffer with their candidate, and now what?
Yeah, and I almost look at those as two different things. So if it's a counteroffer from a company that they're working at, I think you need to go back to that core conversation of, well, what made you want to start looking and considering new opportunities in the very beginning? Because we know the success rate of accepting a counteroffer is not good. 6 to 12 months, 80% of people are going to be gone anyways. Yeah. You just have to ride that journey. If it's multiple offers, I don't ever want to carry the weight or responsibility of them accepting the wrong job because I push them anywhere. So I take the role of a sounding board and just talk through things with them. And I try to take the approach of, okay, if I'm sitting across the table with my best friend and we're having a glass of wine, what are the questions she's not thinking about? What isn't she considering? So having those, or what if it's my spouse, right? So what am I going to want to know? And just try to get them thinking a little bit more broad if they need to, or perhaps they're thinking too broad and we need to go deep. So just talking through the offers and what makes sense. Yeah,
it's I typically when I'm interviewing someone that's working for another company, I pose a question for them to think about, not to answer, but to think about. Are you running from, or are you running to? Right. So if you're running from something, it's probably not a good idea for us to move forward through this process, because you may think you know what you want, but you're going to take anything that gets you out of where you're at today. But if this opportunity is something you want to run to, you're really excited about it, you want to learn everything about this role and the opportunity and the company. If you're running to this opportunity, if you find yourself running to it through this interview process, then it's likely probably a good move for you. And so I like to talk about that up front. And again, I don't want your answer. It's just, I want you to think about this as we go through the process.
Now you have me thinking about all sorts of things too. Is it purpose and passion driven? And that's what, you're like, is it magnetic for you, or is it fear based? Kind of
yes.
Same idea. Oh, I love that. I might steal that.
You can steal it. I love it. I stole it from somebody else.
Perfect.
Um, I know we're coming up on time here. There's always that human element. You mentioned that from the very beginning, and yeah, it's just this. I know this can be hard if you have a large workload, a lot of orders to fill, a lot of clients that you're working with, and you have the candidates themselves. They're going through a lot. They're trying to find the next move for their family. Um, when you look at that human element, how do we maintain that personalized, empathetic experience? Especially when you mentioned the AI, with all these, you're going to be talking to an AI agent over the phone or on video. Like how do you maintain that personalized, be empathetic, just that human element of the experience, especially in 2025 and beyond, where that human element seems like it's going to be less and less. What are your plans, Tina, to maintain that human element?
It's going to be tricky and tricky to
Yes.
navigate, right? Because we don't know what that looks like. But I think making it a priority is going to be crucial. And even if that is hey, I have 5 minutes, let's make the most of this, because I recognize the position you're in, especially again, if they're not working and they just need somebody to hear them. They need the human interaction. So I think it's actually going to start setting recruiters and companies apart, the more human reaction or human interaction that they can get. I mean, AI is a fabulous tool. I love the tools that we do use it for, but it can't be the driver, right? Humans still need to be able to drive and control it. And I think that's where some of the gray area comes into play. But my plan moving forward probably won't change too much. It ebbs and flows with the market, because sometimes candidates are hard to find and nobody's calling. They're all working, so you always have to navigate it a little bit, but also you can't let your day get swallowed up by therapy calls, because it gets heavy and it waits. And so there is a level of protection that you have to do to stay professional as well, and not just absorb the energy. But I think giving them a window of time, like, hey, we have 5 to 10 minutes. Let's hammer this out. What are your top issues? Have them ready that we can start talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. All right. So just to summarize, when it comes to the candidate journey, you got to humanize the experience. You have to, build that initial rapport and relationship, because ultimately you want that to be a long-term relationship, whether they get hired with that client or not. You want to set the priorities up front, or set the expectations up front. You want to understand their priorities, and you want to be able to align their priorities with a bigger picture, with that role they're hoping to move into. Sometimes you got to be creative with candidates and clients to if there's a 80% match, that's a great match. Let's get creative on making that happen. When it comes to expected outcomes through the process, it's really important. The survey of the candidate experience as well as the customer is crucial, and I think most firms miss that. So I'm glad you brought that up. And being an advocate for both the client, for the applicant and the customer, which is sometimes hard to do both.
Keeps us humble.
Yes. Are there anything else about the candidate journey that we missed, or we should just kind of hit on a highlight before we end?
Not that we missed. I would just add that I think long-term talent acquisition professionals find a lot of satisfaction and joy in this part of it. And I know that's what keeps me around personally. So, and I like working with other talent acquisition firms that value that same methodology and treat candidates the same way. And just remember, it is a small world. You never know who's going to be interviewing you next week, and you can't predict the future. So just move forward with kindness and respect, no matter what the situation is.
Move forward with kindness and respect. That's great. Okay. 2 questions. 1, where can people find you? And 2, if there's any book or podcast or resource you'd recommend for people in the professional placement space, what would you recommend?
Where they can find me, question 1, LinkedIn is probably the best avenue, and I'm on there frequently, so I can respond quickly. But LinkedIn or email, Tina@thespectrumsolution.com. The best book, a series that I really, really love and have implemented to my life as a whole, is the Go-Giver series by Bob Burg. A very light, easy read, but it just puts perspective into like you serve people and it comes back around, and it just ultimate like satisfaction and joy of life, and not letting it pass you by and not getting lost in the grind, still keeping the human element alive.
What's the book called? The Goalkeeper?
The Go-Giver.
Go-Giver. Wow.
It's like there's several different Go-Giver books for like relationships or parenting or, different things like that. But all of them are really good and really easy reads.
Awesome. The Go-Giver. Go check it out. Well, Tina, it's been a pleasure. I know we could have went on for hours. Love to have you back anytime. I think there's a lot that we can all learn from you. And I'm excited about 2025. Our industry is going to get pretty interesting in a lot of ways, I think in a lot of good ways. And so if you need help with professional placements, please reach out to Tina. And if you just want to learn from her expertise, if you're already in the industry, go check her out on LinkedIn and give her a follow and engage with her content.
Oh, thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
My pleasure. Next week, next Friday, we are going to be doing an episode part 2 of 1099 versus W-2 and the qualifying criteria and the questions you should be asking your agency to really audit yourself. With the change of the administration, there's a lot of things that are happening in our local economy that if you're an employer, you need to pay attention to. So we're going to give you those tips and insights next Friday. So be sure to tune in. And again, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tina. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. See ya.
Six months ago, I get a call from Steve Farrell, who wants to talk about partnering with Yes for our labor needs. It would
change your approach to staffing.
I told him I've already used multiple agencies and have had headaches with each one. So my approach to staffing is just fine.
With multiple agencies, we thought we had our staffing needs covered.
Hey, the agency employees didn't show up, so we're short on staff again. I'm sorry.
Bupkis. Curses. Fetch.
Hey, an agency sent an employee.
Do you have production experience?
I've produced YouTube videos. I'm hungry. When's my first break?
This is not sustainable. If you want happy customers and a healthy business, something's gotta change. So yes, we tried Yes.